I'm so glad you tuned in for more trauma books. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today this is part 4 of trauma books. Okay, it's been a minute. I know, but we're back. We're here again, and so thank you for tuning in for another extension of the series of trauma books. Before we get into it, make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week, and all we do on this channel is talk about books. So if you like listening to people talk about books, here I am every week doing just that for you. So what does a book have to earn a spot on the trauma list? Well, it has to be traumatizing, okay, to read, first of all. I need to have like a pretty big emotional response to this book. Also, if it has a lot of triggering material, okay? So I will tell you, you know that I don't do spoilers on my channel. Like, I keep everything spoiler free here for you so that you can enjoy a book thoroughly. But I am, after I introduce the book to you, tell you a little bit of what it's about, I am going to give you the trigger list. And that can give spoilers, okay? So I'm going to tell you, here's the trigger list, and that is your cue if you don't want the trigger list, or if you don't want to, you know, get any spoilers or anything like that. That is your cue to move on to the next book in the video. Okay, so you've been warned. If you don't want to listen to the trigger list, which might give away some spoilers for the book, when I tell you when I'm going to do that, you can move on, and there will be no spoilers for you. We're doing 3 books today, and these books all have something in common as they're all YA based books. Like, they're all based on characters that are young adults, which I think is probably the hardest ones to read if they're trauma books. But yes, I'm really excited to share these with you because, and I'll get into this when I'm talking about them, these books are so old for me. Like, I read them so long ago and I still think about them. Like, that to me is a good book. Like, if you still think about it like all this time later, you know what I mean? So yeah, they're all pretty old for me. I read them a long time ago, but I still think about them, and I'll give you the trigger list. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. The first book on the list is Living Dead Girl by Elizabeth Scott. When I tell you all, this book like broke me, okay? I didn't know what I was getting into when I checked out this book. Here it is. Let's talk about it. And again, everything I'm going to tell you in the premise is like stuff that's in the blurb for the book, okay? Like, I'm not giving you anything away by telling you the premise, all right? So this is about a young girl that gets abducted when she's like 6 or 7 or something like that. And we open the book somewhere around there, and then we jump to when she's 15 and she's still with this man that abducted her, except that now she's being asked to do something even worse than what she's already had to do to survive. This book is incredibly short. It's incredibly draining, and it was horrifying in so many ways. I think that if you can't handle, like, again, all these books today are about young women. If you can't handle this kind of a topic about like a young girl, very young girl, getting abducted and living with her abductor for like 7 years, don't read this one. It's pretty heavy, but it was beautifully done. Elizabeth Scott did an amazing job with this book, and this book still haunts me. It really does. I think about it all the time. It's incredibly short too. It's one of those books that you could probably read in a day, and then you could take a really hot shower and go to bed and try to never think about it again. It's very powerful. It's one of those books I think everybody should read, because this happens quite a bit more than people want to think about, especially like in the US. People don't want to think about this happening to them. But there was this video I watched once, and someone said, as you're driving through a neighborhood, how many houses do you think have someone locked up inside that can't get out? Statistically, it's not 0. That's horrifying. Basically, that means that at some point in your life, if you live in the United States, at some point in your life, or hundreds of times in your life, You have driven by a house where someone is being held against their will. I can't even really think about it too long. Anyway, if you like that kind of story, like I said, it's very, very short. This was just terrifyingly breathtaking and very difficult, but I did really enjoy it. Okay, let's do the triggers. Okay, so right off we have abduction and torture. We also have sexual assault of a minor, but I figure you guys probably knew that was coming. And suicide ideation. There is also like coercion happening here as well. And just there is a lot of detail about the sexual assault. So yeah, it's not behind closed doors or anything. Elizabeth Scott's pretty out in the open with everything in this book. That's this one. Like I said, I'll never not think about this book. Okay, we're really digging into the archives here. The next one is Blackbird by Jennifer Lauck. Okay, I read this. First of all, I was too young to read this book. Second of all, I think I was like a freshman in high school when I read this book. That's how long ago this was. Okay? It's like 20 years ago that I read this book, probably. And another thing, my mom told me to read this book. What was she thinking? I don't know. She was like, it'll be good for you to read this book. What do you mean? When I look back on it now, I'm like, why would my mom do that? Let's not get into that. Okay, let's get into the book. So we have a young girl, probably around 7, and this is set in the 70s. So, you know, not now. There's a lot, and I feel like that's sort of what builds this book so much, is because a lot of what happens in the book would not happen now because of how connected people are. Whereas back in the 70s, there really wasn't this giant community type thing. There wasn't the internet. Like, some people didn't even have phone lines in their houses back in the 70s, okay? This is the kind of stuff you need to remember when you're reading a book like this. Like, we don't have this connectivity that we have now, okay? Have this young girl whose mom suddenly passes from a mysterious illness, and from there, her life just starts turning upside down. Like, she has to live with her dad full time, who's not really interested in taking care of her. He remarries, and the situation is just not ideal, and things just keep getting worse and worse and worse for her. And she eventually gets put into the foster care system, where things also are not ideal for her. And this is really just a journey from her childhood to her getting through to adulthood. I would say that if you liked White Oleander, like that sort of a story, except nobody's like a murderer in this book. If you like that sort of story, though, I think that Blackbird follows a very similar path to that, of like going through a lot of things as a younger adult, and then how it shapes you into who you are today. The hardest part about this book is this is Jennifer Lauck's memoir. This is her real life. This all really happened to her. And I think that makes it even more heartbreaking, because it's not fiction. It's someone's actual life that really happened, and they're sitting there telling you their life story in the most beautiful way. I absolutely adore Jennifer Lauck's writing. Like I said, I read this so long ago, and it was so messed up and so sad, and like I didn't even know it was a memoir when I was reading it. Like, I know it says it on the cover, but whatever. I was young. I didn't know. I didn't know until like a lot later that it was her actual story, and that like really broke my heart. Let's get into the triggers. Death of a parent, grief, verbal abuse, sexual assault of a minor, and foster care. Because I know that is kind of a touchy subject for some people, like the foster care system, foster care families, the disparities that kind of happen there, and there are a lot here. So yeah, that's that one. Like I said, this one I read so long ago. I still think about it, and I still wonder how Jennifer's doing. Like, at the end of the book, they really bring it real full circle, and like Jennifer kind of updates you on her life and how she is. Yeah, I hope she's well. Okay, this is the last one. We're really speed rounding it today. I'm like so proud of myself. Sometimes I can talk forever. This is apparently going to be a short one. Okay, it's The Pact by Jodi Picoult. Now y'all listen a second. I've talked about Jodi Picoult on my channel before. Apparently, there are a lot of people out there that absolutely despise Jodi Picoult. Like, they kind of rank her up there with James Patterson. And first of all, really? You're gonna rank her with James Patterson? She's not that bad. But I happen to like Jodi Picoult, and I think the biggest reason that people, from what I can tell based on like people's reviews and things, the reason they don't like Jodi Picoult is that she sort of sits in the gray area a little bit too much, and that she's not super realistic. But I'll get into my opinion on that in a minute. This book, I also read in high school when I was way too young to be reading something like this. Um, but yeah, I think about this Jodi Picoult book probably the most out of all that I've read. And I read a lot of Jodi Picoult when I was in high school and early college. So this one opens with two families. And they're two families that have lived next to each other for forever. The parents are best friends with each other. They all had their kids at the same time. And so when their two kids started dating, and it was almost like this, you know, meant to be kind of thing. Like, there are these two perfect families with these two perfect kids that are now dating, and they're probably going to end up being in-laws, and it's great. Like, this community, this life that they've built together is great. And then the daughter ends up dead, and the boyfriend is holding the gun with a bullet in it that he says was supposed to be for him. So they made some sort of a suicide pact that didn't end up coming to fruition. Right away, the families are gutted by this, and also the police department does not believe this kid's story about a suicide pact or anything like that. There's a whole bunch of things about the crime scene, about the days leading up, about this kid's behavior that makes it seem like they weren't on the same page when this young girl died, and that it didn't happen the way that he says it happened. This is the whole crux of the story, right? Figuring out what really happened to this girl, how this boy was involved, and if these families can continue to stay together, stay friends, stay family-ish, you know what I mean? Like, keep that community bond together. This book was messed up, okay? Like I said, I was really like too young. I don't know if I was too young to read it, because I was, at the age that I read it, I was probably the age of these two kids in this novel. But I remember thinking there was a lot of things I just didn't really understand, and now when I look back on it, I think I was probably too young to be reading it. A lot of people's biggest complaint about this book is that it's not realistic, because what boy would do that? Why wouldn't he get help? Why wouldn't, if he knew that she wanted to have a suicide pact with him, like blah blah blah, why didn't he get her help? He should have taken her to a therapist. And I think people are really like not remembering what it was like to be like 15, 16. I would not have told my parents anything. My parents knew so little about my life when I was 16 that it's like embarrassing. I lived with these people all the time. I saw them every single day. Like, they saw me every single day. I eat dinner with them almost every single night. They did not know anything about my life. And so when people are like, that's just so unrealistic, I don't really think it is. I don't think it's unrealistic that teens hide a large portion of their lives from their parents, especially if they didn't think that they would understand. And I think that's where this kid was. I didn't think anybody would understand. And he also felt so much loyalty to his girlfriend that he was like, I can't betray her trust. I don't know. It made so much sense to me, like the dynamic here. And I was really shocked to see how many people hated this book because they said that no teenager would act that way. I'm sorry. Pretty much every teenager I know, and me as a teenager, and every kid I knew when I was a teenager would have behaved probably the same exact way. And that is shameful because it is a really sad situation. But I can tell you, we would probably all have acted the same way. Our parents didn't know what we were doing. Maybe that's different now. I don't know. But back then, that was pretty normal. So yeah. I don't know. I really liked this book. It also reminded me a lot of that movie, or that show, sorry, 13 Reasons. And for the record, I absolutely hated that show. So I think that this has a little bit better of direction than the show did. But I think that if you really enjoyed 13 Reasons, then you probably would like the angle that this book portrays. Like what we're going through, what we're feeling, etc., etc. Let's get into the triggers: death, grief, gun violence, suicide ideation, sexual assault of a minor, and depression. Okay, that's all I have for you guys today. Like I said, this one was super short. Like I'm really surprised that I kept it this short, but all of these books kind of speak for themselves. And like the Living Dead Girl book, I feel like a lot of people have read that. A lot of people know what it's about. I saw it a lot of places before I even picked it up, and that was like 5 or 6 years ago when I read it. The other two, I feel like Blackbird is really a lesser known book because it's a memoir. It probably didn't get as much shine time as like a fiction book. Also, this book is like pretty old. Like I said, Jennifer Lauck was a child in the 70s when this was set, and it got published. It was probably like the early 2000s when it was published, like if I'm being honest. So it is an older book. And the same with Jodi Picoult. Like, I'll either get a lot of hate for Jodi Picoult or you guys just won't even care. But yeah, I happen to like her. When I said that people kind of hate that she stays in the gray area, I actually love that about her because she doesn't force an opinion on you. Like, I feel like you can take in all the evidence and feel how you want to feel about it. Usually her books center around some sort of like a court case or crime or something like that, and so that kind of keeps it a little bit more fast paced. But yeah, she lets you sit in this gray area for so long, and then it kind of forces you to really think about it and really form an opinion of your own about how you feel about the situation, which I think is like a unique thing that she does, at least for me anyway. Make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week. And yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Leave me a comment if you liked these books, if you hated these books, if you want more trauma books in your life, because I have more ready to go for you guys. I planned out the next couple months of content, and I'm excited about how all that's gonna go. And I'm finally gonna like push myself to achieve some goals because we should be achieving some goals this year, right? I'm so excited about the books I've read this month already. I'm super excited. It's been a really good reading month already, and I'm super stoked to share those with you. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys today, and I will see you all next time. Bye!